I don't mean to be disrespectful, but these are peculiar names for children.
I don't think so.
Frank Zappa was one of the most unusual and creative musicians in the history of modern music, and when he spoke about the artists who inspired him, he gave people a clear picture of how his brilliant and unpredictable mind worked. Zappa never followed the rules of rock, jazz, or classical music. Instead, he used pieces of every style to create something that was completely his own. When he talked about his 10 favorite musicians of all time, many people were surprised because the list showed that he was influenced by a wide range of creative thinkers who came from different backgrounds, cultures, and musical traditions. These musicians shaped his mind when he was young, pushed him to explore new ideas when he became famous, and helped him understand how powerful music could be when used with imagination, discipline, and courage. Zappa was not the kind of artist who liked simple things. He believed music should make the listener think, should push boundaries, and should take risks. And because of that, the musicians he loved most were not always the most famous names, but the ones who were fearless, bold, and willing to break the rules of their time. The first major influence on Zappa was Jimi Hendrix, a man who completely changed the way people thought about the electric guitar. Before Hendrix, the guitar was mostly used to play chords, simple riffs, or clean solos. But Hendrix turned the guitar into something else entirely, an emotional machine that could scream, cry, whisper, or explode with energy. Zappa admired how Hendrix used feedback, distortion, and studio effects to control sound in ways no one else had done before. Hendrix treated the recording studio like a painter treats a canvas. He mixed sounds, changed textures, and created layers that looked simple on the surface but were actually very detailed. Zappa believed Hendrix was not just a guitarist, but a true composer, someone who built whole worlds out of sound. Hendrix could take the blues, mix it with rock, and then add strange and beautiful noises that made listeners feel they were entering another universe. Zappa respected this because he also believed music should surprise people and open new doors. Hendrix's album, Electric Ladyland, had a huge effect on Zappa because it showed what could happen when a musician was not afraid to experiment. Hendrix followed his instincts, trusted his imagination, and created music that still sounds fresh decades later. Zappa once said that Hendrix had a deep understanding of sound, and this understanding pushed Zappa to explore new possibilities in his own music. Another name that shaped Zappa's career was Captain Beefheart, whose real name was Dom Van Vliet. He was not only Zappa's childhood friend, but also one of the strangest and most original artists in rock history. Captain Beefheart never cared about making hits or pleasing record companies. He only cared about making music that felt true to his strange and powerful imagination. His songs often sounded wild, chaotic, and confusing, but at the same time, they were filled with meaning and personality. Zappa admired Beefheart's courage because he never changed his style to fit what the world wanted. Their friendship lasted for many years, and they worked together on several projects, including the famous album, Trout Mask Replica, which Zappa produced. The album is now considered one of the most daring works ever made. Many people did not understand it when it first came out because it used strange rhythms, sharp notes, and surreal words, but Zappa understood what Beefheart was trying to do. He believed music could be art, poetry, and philosophy all at once. Captain Beefheart proved that music did not need to be pretty or smooth to be meaningful. It could be rough, messy, and strange, and still be important. That idea stayed with Zappa for the rest of his life. Zappa also admired Pierre Boulez, a French composer and conductor known for his mastery of modern classical music. Boulez was one of the most respected classical musicians of the 20th century because he believed that music should always move forward. He studied complex forms, wrote difficult pieces, and pushed the classical world to accept new ideas. Zappa respected him because he understood structure, discipline, and control. Even when Boulez wrote something wild or experimental, every detail had purpose. Zappa believed that creativity needed balance. You could have crazy ideas, but you also needed to understand how to organize them so the music made sense. When Boulez agreed to conduct Zappa's orchestral works in the 1980s, it was more than just a collaboration, it was proof that Zappa's classical side was serious and respected. Zappa had studied classical music for years, but many people did not realize how deep his knowledge went. Boulez saw that Zappa's compositions were full of clever rhythms, unusual harmonies, and careful planning. Zappa learned from Boulez that even the wildest experiments need a strong foundation, and this lesson influenced everything he wrote. But Zappa's love for experimental musicians did not end with classical music. He was also deeply influenced by Karlheinz Stockhausen, one of the creators of electronic music. Stockhausen believed that music was not limited to instruments like guitars or pianos. He believed sound could come from machines, tapes, or any other source if used creatively. He experimented with early synthesizers, cut and rearranged tapes, and explored new ways to place sound in space. For example, some of his pieces were designed so that sounds moved around the room, surprising the listener from different directions. Zappa loved this idea because he also believed that music should feel alive, physical, and unpredictable. Stockhausen showed him that technology could be part of the creative process. It was not just a tool to record music, it could help create music. This opened Zappa's mind to new possibilities and helped shape the way he produced his own records. Another giant on Zappa's list was Igor Stravinsky, a composer whose work changed Zappa's life when he was still a teenager. Stravinsky wrote The Rite of Spring, a piece that shocked audiences in 1913 because it used harsh rhythms, loud sounds, and unexpected turns. For young Frank Zappa, hearing this piece was like discovering a new world. It showed him that music did not have to be smooth or gentle, it could be aggressive, loud, and full of energy, just like rock and roll. Zappa studied Stravinsky's music closely, trying to understand how he built his complex rhythms. Many of Zappa's later pieces were directly inspired by the way Stravinsky layered sounds and created organized chaos. For Zappa, Stravinsky represented the perfect combination of tradition and innovation. He respected the rules of classical music but also broke them whenever he felt it was necessary. This balance became the heart of Zappa's own musical identity. These names, Hendrix, Beefheart, Boulez, Stockhausen, and Stravinsky, are only part of the full list of musicians Zappa admired. But even these alone show how wide his musical world was. He listened to rock, blues, jazz, classical music, electronic experiments, and everything in between. Each artist gave him a new way of looking at sound, and each helped him shape his own style. When Zappa talked about his favorite musicians, he was not just naming people he liked. He was telling the world what he valued: bravery, originality, discipline, imagination, and the desire to explore the unknown. These qualities became the core of his music, and they helped him create a legacy that continues to inspire musicians today. Frank Zappa's list of favorite musicians did not only reveal his influences, it also revealed how he thought about creativity itself. Zappa believed that great music came from people who were not afraid to explore new ideas, even when those ideas seemed strange, risky, or completely different from what everyone else was doing. This belief shaped his own career, and it shaped the way he looked at other musicians. When he chose his favorite artists, he did not pick people who were simply popular or successful. He chose people who moved music forward, people who opened new paths that others had never walked before. He admired musicians who were brave enough to sound different, because he understood how hard it was to stand alone and create something that the world might not understand at first. For Zappa, music was a form of discovery, and the musicians he respected most were explorers who pushed the boundaries of sound and expression. One of the strongest examples of this was Frank Zappa's admiration for avant-garde composers, people who worked far from the mainstream but created ideas that later influenced entire generations. Karlheinz Stockhausen was one of those people. Stockhausen's work with electronic sound, tape manipulation, and experimental structures may seem normal today, but when he first began exploring these ideas, they were completely new. Many traditional musicians and audiences did not understand what he was doing. Some even criticized him for pushing music too far away from normal instruments and melodies. But Zappa loved how Stockhausen refused to be limited by tradition. He admired how Stockhausen used machines, technology, and new tools as creative partners, not just for recording but for building music from the ground up. Zappa often said that music should not be a museum of old rules, it should be something that grows and adapts with the world. Stockhausen helped show him that electronic sound could be emotional, dramatic, and powerful. He proved that technology didn't destroy musical expression, it expanded it. This idea became important in Zappa's own work, especially in his studio albums, which were filled with complex edits, unusual effects, and creative sound designs that few rock musicians had ever attempted. Pierre Boulez was another major figure who represented Zappa's respect for discipline and structure. While Stockhausen focused on electronics and experimental sound, Boulez focused on precision, control, and organization. He was known for being extremely meticulous, for studying every detail of a musical score, and for demanding the highest level of performance from musicians. Some people found Boulez's approach intimidating, but Zappa found it inspiring. He believed that even the wildest musical ideas needed a solid framework. Without structure, he believed, music could lose its direction and become meaningless noise. Boulez showed him how to build clear shapes out of complex ideas, how to guide listeners through unfamiliar musical territory without leaving them lost. When Boulez conducted Zappa's orchestral works, he treated them with the same seriousness he gave to the great classical composers of the past. This was deeply meaningful for Zappa, because it meant that someone he respected believed his work had value. It encouraged him to continue writing classical pieces even when critics didn't always appreciate them. Boulez helped Zappa understand that experimentation and discipline were not opposites, they were partners. Zappa's admiration for classical composers also extended to Igor Stravinsky, whose music remained a foundation for Zappa throughout his life. When Zappa first heard The Rite of Spring, he realized that classical music was not limited to calm, pretty sounds. It could be loud, unpredictable, and intense. Stravinsky used sharp rhythms, strange harmonies, and sudden changes that shocked early listeners. Zappa loved this because it was similar to what he wanted to do in rock. He wanted to surprise listeners, to break patterns, and to make them pay attention to details. Stravinsky proved that audiences could learn to appreciate new ideas if composers were bold enough to share them. Zappa studied Stravinsky's scores so carefully that he could explain how every rhythm and accent worked. This influence appeared in many of Zappa's compositions, which often used quick shifts, unusual beats, and overlapping layers that felt chaotic but were actually carefully planned. People who listen closely to Zappa's music can hear Stravinsky's influence in pieces that jump quickly between moods, styles, and tempos. But Zappa's favorite musicians were not all classical or experimental. His love for Jimi Hendrix showed that he respected musicians who used emotion and instinct as much as technique. Hendrix's guitar playing was full of feeling, passion, and energy. Zappa admired how Hendrix could take a simple musical idea and turn it into something huge by using his imagination. Hendrix did not just play the guitar, he communicated with it. He made it shout, growl, float, twist, and transform. Zappa believed that this ability came from a deep connection between the artist and his instrument. Hendrix trusted his instincts and allowed sound to guide him. Zappa appreciated this kind of freedom because he also believed that music should come from curiosity and emotion, not just rules. Hendrix showed him that technical skill was important, but so was the courage to let creativity take over. Even though Zappa's style was very different from Hendrix's, he felt a strong bond with him because they both believed music should break limits. Captain Beefheart brought yet another perspective into Zappa's world. While Hendrix showed the emotional side of creativity and Boulez showed the structural side, Beefheart showed the importance of raw originality. Beefheart did not follow anyone's rules, not the music industry's rules, not the audience's expectations, and not even the rules of conventional melody or rhythm. His music sometimes sounded like it came from another planet. Zappa admired him because he created from a deep, personal place that did not depend on approval or success. Beefheart's unusual voice, unpredictable rhythms, and poetic words revealed a mind that was completely free. Zappa respected how Beefheart used his imagination without fear. Their friendship, though sometimes difficult, was built on mutual respect for each other's boldness. Beefheart reminded Zappa that true creativity requires honesty, even when honesty is strange, uncomfortable, or misunderstood. Zappa also valued musicians who mastered their instruments to the highest level. He admired people who took their craft seriously, who practiced for hours every day, and who understood the technical details of their art. To Zappa, skill was not just about talent. It was about dedication. He believed that musicians should always be improving, learning, and expanding their abilities. This belief was influenced by both classical and jazz traditions, where practice and precision are essential. Zappa respected artists who could perform complex pieces with clarity and control. He hired musicians who could handle difficult rhythms, unusual harmonies, and sudden changes. The musicians on his list often shared this high level of skill. Even Hendrix, who played with wild energy, had a deep understanding of sound and technique. Even Beefheart, whose music sounded chaotic, knew exactly what he wanted and worked hard to achieve it. Zappa's admiration for these artists showed his belief that creativity and skill were connected. To him, great musicians were not only imaginative, they were prepared. At the same time, Zappa also respected musicians who challenged society and used their art to express ideas that went beyond music. Some of the people he admired were thinkers, writers, and rebels who used sound as a way to communicate deeper messages. Zappa himself often included social commentary in his songs. He spoke out against censorship, ignorance, and conformity. He believed that music could open people's minds and encourage them to question the world around them. When Zappa praised a musician, it often meant he valued the way that person influenced culture, not just the way they played. He respected people who were not afraid to question authority or express uncomfortable truths. This was another reason he admired artists like Captain Beefheart and Karlheinz Stockhausen. Their work challenged what people thought music should be. These different influences, emotion, discipline, originality, rebellion, and skill, helped Zappa form a broad understanding of what made a musician great. His list of favorites may seem unusual because it includes rock guitarists, classical composers, avant-garde innovators, and experimental artists. But to Zappa, they all shared something important: they pushed music forward. They did not settle for ordinary ideas. They searched for something new, and they made the world listen. This belief guided Zappa throughout his career. He never wanted to repeat what others had done. He wanted to take music to places it had never been, just like the musicians he admired. This is why his list remains an important clue to understanding his mind. When we look at the artists Zappa respected most, we also learn why his own music continues to inspire people today. When we look at Frank Zappa's list of favorite musicians, we begin to understand something very important about him. He was not trying to impress anyone or follow popular taste. He was simply sharing the names of people who changed the way he saw music and helped him understand what true creativity really means. Zappa was someone who always followed his own path, and the musicians he admired were people who did the same. Many of them were not household names, and many did not make simple music. Instead, they made bold, difficult, unusual works that pushed listeners to think differently. This was exactly the kind of art Zappa respected. He believed music should open the mind and push boundaries. He believed that comfort was the enemy of growth and that great music often came from people who refused to stay inside the box. So when he talked about his favorite musicians, he was really talking about the people who gave him the courage to keep experimenting his entire life. One of the biggest things we see from his choices is that Zappa had an incredible respect for musicians who were brave. He didn't admire people who simply played well or followed trends. He admired the ones who took risks. For example, Jimi Hendrix took the electric guitar and turned it into something completely new. Nobody had heard sounds like his before. Most guitarists tried to play clean and correct, but Hendrix broke the rules by using feedback, distortion, and strange techniques that shocked people. Instead of hiding these wild sounds, he used them as expressive tools. Zappa loved this fearlessness because he believed music needed explorers, people who were not afraid to make mistakes or to sound different. Hendrix proved that the guitar could be more than an instrument. It could be a voice, a storm, a painting, or a fire. His creativity inspired millions, and Zappa was one of them. He saw Hendrix as someone who showed what happens when you follow your imagination without limits.